Okay, sergeants, start your recordings. According to the PC, all set.
Cloud recording is good.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and welcome to the remote hearing on the fiscal 2023 preliminary budget. Committee on Education. Will council members and staff please turn on their video at this time? Thank you. To minimize disruption, please place all cell phones and electronics to vibrate. To send testimony, please send it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that's testimony@council.nyc.gov. Chair Dinowitz, we're ready to begin.
Thank you, Sergeant. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fiscal 2023 preliminary budget hearing for the Committee on Higher Education. I'm Councilmember Eric Dinowitz, Chair of the committee, and I am pleased to be joined by fellow council members, Councilmember Felice and Councilmember Barron. Today, we will hear on the fiscal 2023 preliminary budget, the fiscal 2022 preliminary mayor's management report, and the fiscal 2022-2026 preliminary capital commitment plan for the city of New York. As a former teacher and as a CUNY graduate myself, it's a particular honor to chair this committee. CUNY's fiscal 2023 preliminary budget totals $1.35 billion. This represents almost 1.5% of the city's total fiscal 2023 preliminary budget of $98.5 billion. The City University of New York provides higher education to more than 261,000 degree and non-degree seeking students and offers adult and continuing education with over 185,000 course registrants. I want to hear from CUNY how this preliminary plan is responding to the needs of our community and how resources will be utilized to ensure quality education, affordability and accessibility for students, and continuation of food pantries, mental health, guidance, and housing services. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to have a devastating impact on New York City. Today, we need to hear from CUNY on what CUNY is doing to support our city's students during this historically trying time. Our students work hard to earn high marks in their classes, and we also know that students are more than their GPA. What adjustments and modifications is CUNY making to assist students in their academics and in other aspects of their lives like food security, mental health, housing, and job placement? How is CUNY investing in wraparound services and programs that support the entire student? I want to ensure that the city and CUNY are taking its rightful position to ease the current economic and social pains for its students. I am disappointed to see the implementation of programmatic PEGs at a time when our students need the most funding. The financial plan represents a $1.35 billion budget for CUNY in fiscal 2023 and projects the agency's spending will remain relatively flat through the plan. The plan does reflect a drop in federal funding with zero budgeted in the out years. The drop in federal funding worries me, as this committee also waits to see what will come down from the state in the enacted budget. Does CUNY have concerns on how to support existing programs when federal funding ends in fiscal 2023? The fiscal 2023 preliminary plan includes $934.6 million to support 6,259 positions across the community colleges and Hunter campus schools, with 4,313 or 69% budgeted full-time pedagogical faculty. The plan includes a net increase of 47 positions. Can you provide the committee with additional information at this hearing regarding the roles of these additional headcounts? We will also be taking a closer look at how CUNY organizes its capital commitment plan for the fiscal 2022 to fiscal 2026. I look forward to learning more about how the university has rebounded from the pause of its capital projects and what issues or efficiencies have arisen. It is the council's responsibility to ensure that the city's budget is fair, transparent, equitable, and accountable to New Yorkers. This includes equity in funding and assistance. As the chair of the Committee on Higher Education, I will continue to push for accountability and accuracy and ensure that the budget reflects the needs and interests of our city. This hearing is a vital part of this process, and I expect that CUNY will be responsive to the questions and concerns of council members. I look forward to an active engagement with the administration over the next few months to ensure that the fiscal 2023 adopted budget meets the goals the council has set out. In advance, I would like to thank the commissioner, PSC, advocates, and our other panelists for testifying today. I would also like to thank my staff, the committee staff, and the staff of the Finance Division for their help in preparing for this remote hearing. Thank you. I'd also like to add that we've been joined by Council members Vernikoff and Brewer.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Amy Briggs. I am counsel to the New York City Council's Committee on Higher Education. And before we begin, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you are recognized to speak, at which time you will be unmuted by the Zoom host. If you mute yourself after you have been unmuted, you will need to be unmuted again by our host. Please be aware that there could be a delay in muting and unmuting, so please be patient. For public testimony, we will call up individuals in panels. Please listen for your name, and I will periodically announce the next few panelists. Once I call your name, a member of our staff will unmute you. The Sergeant at Arms will set a clock and give you the go-ahead to begin your testimony. All public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. During the hearing, if council members would like to ask questions, please use the raise hand function in Zoom and you will be called on to speak. We will be limiting council member questions to 5 minutes, including responses. Today's first panel will include representatives from CUNY, followed by council member questions and then public testimony. For CUNY, we will have Chancellor Felix Matos Rodriguez, Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Operating Officer Hector Batista, Vice Chancellor for Facilities Planning, Construction and Management, Mohammed Atala, and Interim Vice Chancellor for Budget and Finance and Chief Financial Officer Christina Chiappa. Apologies. I will now administer the oath to the administration. When you hear your name, please respond once a member of our staff unmutes you. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Chancellor Matos Rodriguez.
I do.
Executive Vice Chancellor Batista.
I do.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor Atala.
I do.
Thank you. And Interim Vice Chancellor Chiappa.
I do.
Thank you very much. Chancellor Matos Rodriguez, you may begin presenting your testimony when ready.
Thank you and good afternoon, Chair Dinowitz and members of the City Council Higher Education Committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify here with my colleagues from the City University of New York and for the Council's steadfast support for CUNY. I am extremely honored and humbled to serve in the premier and largest urban public university in the United States. And despite all the challenges that we've had in the past 2 years, I come to you today optimistic about the future and about CUNY's priorities, plans, and goals for the coming fiscal year and beyond. We completed the 2021 academic year, which was mainly remote, and awarded 59,295 degrees, the largest number of degrees in our 175-year history. This represents an increase of nearly 5% from 2019-2020. The ability of the CUNY community to reach this milestone in the face of unprecedented challenges exemplifies the perseverance of our students, the determination of our faculty and staff, and the importance of our mission. Thanks to strong advocacy from our New York State and city partners, we received much needed aid from the federal government, and we put that aid to great use. These funds were used to advance a number of initiatives that directly assisted our students. We expanded, for example, the university's mental health services to assist the increasing number of students at CUNY struggling with the effects of the pandemic, using $5 million from federal stimulus funding in each of the last 2 fiscal years. This allowed colleges to reach out more students with face-to-face online counseling and other remote wellness services. CUNY made history by launching the CUNY Comeback Program, erasing more than $100 million in unpaid tuition and fees for more than 57,000 students through what is believed to be the country's largest debt forgiveness initiative of its kind. CUNY oversaw the timely distribution of $456 million in emergency grants from 3 federal stimulus bills. The remaining $181 million of the ARPA student emergency funds are being distributed this spring. We announced last week that CUNY is investing $8 million to develop CUNY Online, a new initiative to build online capacity at CUNY and produce high-quality online courses and programs that meet our students' needs. CUNY Online will be directed by the CUNY School of Professional Studies, the university's premier and award-winning online institution, and will provide cost-effective services to support all 25 CUNY campuses in developing new online programs and expanding existing ones. CUNY continues to distinguish itself and be recognized for our quality, affordability, and effectiveness in propelling students up the socioeconomic ladder. Among our recent accolades, 10 of CUNY's 4-year colleges were named among the top performing public colleges in the Northern US in the 2021 rankings by US News and World Report. The magazine also named 8 CUNY colleges among the best for social mobility and cited 8 schools for their strong ethnic diversity. Meanwhile, 6 CUNY community colleges are eligible for the 2023 Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence, considered by many as the highest recognition for community college achievement in the nation. And they are the only ones selected in New York State for this distinction. I am so proud that throughout the pandemic, we have provided direct assistance to the wider New York City community in fighting COVID-19. CUNY colleges across all 5 boroughs hosted vaccination sites and pop-ups, collaborating with the city, state, and federal governments to vaccinate over 500,000 New Yorkers, with the 2 largest sites at York College and Medgar Evers College reaching underserved communities of color in Queens and Brooklyn. More than 2,500 CUNY nursing and medical students stepped forward to help run vaccination sites across New York City. Countless CUNY faculty, staff, and students have been on the front lines, helping to run vaccination sites, working in hospital, clinics, and other medical facilities. CUNY is also a regional research powerhouse with externally sponsored research and programs totaling over $500 million that contribute knowledge and develop solutions for critical regional and national challenges, including climate crisis, energy, and public health. These research funds are also another way CUNY helps to generate economic activity and job creation in New York City. CUNY's budget for fiscal 23 takes into account the university's priorities as well as the crucial role the university will play in the post-pandemic recovery of New York City and New York State. The budget request is available on our website, and we will ensure that the members of this committee and the City Council finance staff receive electronic copies. Turning to the city's preliminary budget, this year we face a 75.9 million reduction. In fiscal 23, 61.2 million of that reduction is restored. Unfortunately, an efficiency target of 14.6 million is baseline. We are hopeful that this 14.6 million will be fully restored so that community colleges can continue to provide the instructional support and services that students need to complete their courses of study, advance their careers, and further their educational dreams. This reduction is especially challenging given the additional stress community colleges are facing and the unprecedented impact COVID has had on community college enrollment. While CUNY is not unique in facing these challenges, and we're taking targeted steps to reverse this trend. Decreased CUNY Community College enrollment has led to a $113 million decrease in tuition revenue since fiscal year 2019. The preliminary budget does not include the Peter F. Ballone Scholarship, and we ask for your advocacy in funding this essential student support program. We request the restoration of $2 million for remediation programs, $3 million for Citizenship Now, and $1 million for food insecurity programs, and $600,000 for childcare. Restoring these funds will assist our students who have been greatly impacted by the pandemic. Additionally, we ask that you restore $1.4 million in funding for technology incubators, which help promote growth of the technology sector in the Bronx, Queens, and Staten Island, along with $500,000 for the CUNY Diversity Incubator, which creates and cultivates an inclusive campus experience, $225,000 for the Veteran Peer Advocacy Program, and other council-funded program initiatives totaling $6.9 million. Now, I will turn to the capital budget. In response to the pandemic, CUNY engaged consultants who visited our buildings to determine whether they met appropriate air quality standards. Where possible, immediate remediation work, such as replacing air filters and air conditioning units, was completed. Since then, additional projects have been completed, and HVAC and air quality work continues to be a priority for CUNY. Designs for capital renewal projects include new criteria to improve the indoor air quality for our buildings and to ensure the continued health and safety of our community. As you know, we are very grateful that Governor Hochul executive budget recommended matching funds of $44.8 million in funding for the city council, borough presidents, and the mayor in the city's fiscal 2022 adopted budget. CUNY has over 7 million square feet of community college facilities, 3/4 of which is over 40 years old. These funds will shore up essential infrastructure systems that support facility operations. The city council has a long history of being a strong partner for CUNY, and the council has provided $240 million to CUNY in the last 5 years, allowing a vast number of capital projects to proceed. We hope the new council will continue this partnership. During the pandemic, there was obviously a slowdown in our work. However, CUNY now is pressing ahead with many projects. Let me share some information on some of the projects that have been recently completed or are in process. We have completed the expansion of CUNY in the Heights in Inwood. The expansions allow CUNY, primarily through BMCC, to increase virtual higher education services to the community and thereby providing many ladders to educational attainment and careers. We also completed improvements on the plaza in front of BMCC's 199 Chambers Street building. Work in progress includes ongoing campus-wide utility upgrades at Bronx Community College, roughly totaling $161 million. Also at Bronx Community College, the desperately needed roof replacement at the Bronx Gold Memorial Library is preserving one of CUNY's most beautiful and historic buildings. And we also completed the renovation work at the Performing Arts Center at Queensboro Community College. I am also pleased to announce that we have leased additional space for Gutman Community College, and we're still working on a plan for its permanent location. Lastly, I want to mention two very important projects which will expand the available state-of-the-art instructional buildings for CUNY nursing and allied health professional programs. First, the new Lehman College Nursing School building, which is under construction. And second, one of our major priorities, the Allied Health and Science building for Ostos Community College. This major facility will provide modern classrooms and science labs for the college's allied health programs, which provides essential workforce development. Funding is needed for this construction. While funding will not come from the city council, the city's share of the funds is $150 million. I must emphasize that critical maintenance continues to be a major capital priority at our community colleges. And we need your continued support for this long-term effort. I am extremely optimistic about the future of this great university, especially in light of the challenges we have overcome this past 2 years. CUNY is an important engine of the city's recovery from the pandemic. We have learned invaluable lessons and have seen what we can be accomplished by pulling together and lifting each other, even while being buffeted by profound difficulty and loss. CUNY has persevered, and we must continue our integral role in the sustenance and betterment of New York. Working together and with your support, I know that we will. That concludes my abridged testimony, and I'll be happy to answer any questions the members might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Before I turn to Chair Dinowitz for questions, I'd like to remind council members to use the raise hand function in Zoom to indicate that they have a question for this panel. Chair Dinowitz.
Thank you, Chancellor, for joining us today and for your testimony. You know, I appreciate some of the things that you spoke about affordability and about the work that CUNY is already doing, not just for our students, but for our whole city, especially when you were talking about your vaccination efforts and the work that CUNY did there. The fiscal 2023 preliminary plan includes one new need that adds baseline funding of $4.9 million beginning in fiscal year 2023 to support leases at 3 community colleges and CUNY Prep. Were there other new needs requested that were not included in the plan?
Let me turn to our interim CFO, Christina Chapa, for that, because that's a rather technical question. I want to make sure that we get that right.
Okay.
Sorry, that just took a second.
All right.
I'm sorry, Chair Dinowitz, are you asking just about mandatory needs or all needs?
And other new needs that were requested but weren't included in the preliminary plan.
Yeah, I mean, we could provide a list of that. In terms of the $4.9 million we received in leases, we have a few other lease requests that we were adding to our new needs fund as well. And we had asked for things like inflationary OTS increases and some other programmatic items also. So we could certainly provide that. I just feel like I would go on too long into that question.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate for you to provide information. I don't think you have to worry about going on too long.
So, and Chancellor, I might need your assist a little bit on this. So, you know, there are a few, you know, if you looked back at our budget request, we have some categories of programmatic initiatives. Mm-hmm. Really, I think are the bulk of our new needs requests. And we're asking for things like mental health and, you know, full-time faculty. And like I said, let me just find a list on that. And we also have some great career initiatives as well.
And I think it'd be easier if we can just provide you a list of those two things, and it'd be two things that we request and the things that were included in the, we mentioned some of them in the items in my testimony in which we spoke about sort of restoration. So we'll be happy to provide that list to the committee so that we can be precise.
Thank you. Just regarding that, we mentioned the testimony, a lot of those were restorations of existing programs, and we'll get to some of those programs. Were there any new initiatives or new programs on the expense side that you're looking to implement that you requested?
So there are requests, particularly on the line of additional sort of workforce development and work on aligning students with careers. that I know that it's being assessed by the mayor's office, right? So that might not be right now in the preliminary budget, but we feel, rather confident that there be support, for example, for that important line of work, which is crucial for student success and is also crucial to the recovery of the city.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Workforce development. You'd also mentioned mental health, and the university is requesting $2 million for these mental health services. So can you describe a little more how that funding would be utilized?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. I mean, we knew at the university that mental health services was something that was a substantial need for our students before the pandemic. The pandemic only exacerbated that. We have put each year $5 million of the federal stimulus funding to increase the number of services that the students face in the campuses. We've done it two ways. Some money has gone to the campuses for additional personnel, or when we were virtual, to be able to add additional time for telehealth and such programs for the students. And we've also been able to purchase some central services, right, that serve the entire system, that generate efficiencies by the central office being able to buy some resources that then all the students and the faculty and staff can access. We would like to make those investments permanent because the need was there, and we want to continue. I think one of the things that we learned in the pandemic was that through telehealth, right, that we could reach a lot more students in a much more efficient way. That will never replace some of the face-to-face counseling that we'll always need to have. But we want to continue to invest in the things that during the pandemic, we found out that had demand by the students, and there were some support services using text, mobile devices, and things of that nature.
Good. I one of the things I brought up at the last hearing is there's a difference between the existence of a program and then proactive outreach to students to engage them in the programming. And I am referring to it now in reference to mental health. Last hearing, it was in reference to remedial programs for our high schoolers, and services for students with disabilities. So I hope that as part of that investment and this programming, that outreach to the students and being proactive about this is part of the consideration when considering funding and how to implement these programs. I'm going to.
Absolutely, and thank you for that observation. And I also want to point out that we are also investing in mental health supports for our faculty and staff too, right? Because they've been obviously very impacted by the pandemic. We want to make sure that we also take good care of them.
Yeah, I love that you said that. As a former educator, union member, I know how important it is to support staff. Part of that, of course, you understand, is compensation, right? That's part of a person's mental health, and honestly, a lot of families struggle with. A lot of families fight about finances, and so, for example, CUNY has these vital remediation programs like the CUNY Language Immersion, Math Start, CUNY Start, which we spoke about at previous hearings. But there are serious pay inequities between them. And so is there any consideration for funds to bring the level of pay for CLIP and Math Start instructors to parity with CUNY Start, for example?
So, I mean, I think those are some questions too that we need to navigate around sort of our collective bargaining. So I want to be careful in answering any questions on that front, but we'll be happy to take a look at your specific commentary and provide you more information.
Yeah, I encourage you to see the relationship between that dignity of that paycheck, and of course the vital mental health programs that I know you believe in CUNY, and you are invested in your actions. I'm just going to ask a few more questions about funding, then I'm going to turn it over to some committee members for questions, and then I'll finish up my questions. I just want to ask about first tuition, because I know we talk about TAP eligibility and the TAP gap. And can you speak a little bit about the problems arising from this TAP gap?
Well, thank you for the question, and we're very appreciative that the governor and the executive budget sort of address the issue of TAP that has been historically brought up by the university, and actually in last year's budget, the plan back then was to begin a scaled version over 3 years to be able to address that that gap between what what TAP provides and what the tuition of the university is. So very appreciative that that gap is addressed in the governor's executive budget, a huge step forward. There continues to be some mandatory increases that we've had since that tuition ceiling was set 3 years ago, which we're concerned about. And those are mandatory costs associated with leases and inflation and buildings, and also increases, the mandatory increases that we negotiated in a collective bargaining agreement with the PSC. We are incredibly encouraged by the fact that the governor's executive budget included part-time TAP. It is something that we have as a university been requesting for a very long time. That is going to have a significant impact, mostly for community college students that have a larger number of part-time students. So we're very appreciative of that. The chance of also TAP now applying to individuals who are incarcerated, I think is something, a huge sort of policy benefit that would allow us to serve that population in a better way. So those are some of the things in the around TAP that I would like to highlight.
Great. And to be clear, if a student's TAP funding does not fully meet tuition and costs, CUNY covers the difference, right?
That is correct.
Does the executive budget fully cover that gap that exists?
The TAP gap is fully covered in the executive budget.
Okay, and more in line with tuition is how many students qualify for the Excelsior Scholarship?
That is a rather small number. I am sure that if you give us some time, when you come and ask me again, someone will provide me the exact number that I can give to you. But it's a rather small number in the system.
I think there have been a lot of questions about the Excelsior Scholarship in the first place, but the question is really around: does the Excelsior Scholarship also have a role in providing some of that tuition? Excelsior Scholarship hopefully is filling some of the gap, but would love to see those numbers of how many students qualify. And of course, how many students are actually utilizing that. And my third question being what role CUNY is taking in providing supports to students to apply for the Excelsior Scholarship, or really any other sort of a scholarship. In other words, my big question is CUNY perhaps leaving money on the table where if a staff member were helping them apply for scholarships and any other program, CUNY would actually, not have to make up either less of a difference in that tuition or not have to make up any difference at all.
So a number of things. First, even if the Excelsior numbers might be small, they're all part of a larger sort of robust network of support by New York State in an investment in higher education, particularly if we compare New York to other states, right? So even if the number is small, right, for that small number of students, it makes a difference. In this case, it's the students that make a little under $125,000 a year. So it's all part of an ecosystem of support for the students. I think that our financial aid counselors on the campuses do a very good job in connecting students to programs that they qualify for based on income eligibility, for example, and other kinds of fellowships and programs that we have. During the pandemic, for example, we raised over $10 million in the Chancellor's Emergency Support Program, which was a way to supplement some of the funding that students might not have. I think that a more pressing concern, if you ask me, going back to the premise of your question about leaving money on the table, is less students completing the FAFSA, which is the form that allows them to be able to be eligible for federal and state aid. We have seen it's a nationwide problem that with the pandemic, we have less students doing that. Numbers in New York State, New York City are about 4 or 5% less students filling out that form. If they don't fill out that form, we can now provide them with federal and state assistance. So we are redoubling our efforts working with the DOE, making sure that we help students and we remind them of the importance of filling out that form so that all kinds of aids can be available to them.
Yeah, it's probably a little easier when students are in high school. You have more of a captive audience, but I think it relates back to the question I had about mental health supports and the question I had last hearing about supports for students with IEPs, which is how proactive are those efforts, right? There is a real difference between putting up a poster in the cafeteria about FAFSA and then actually going into the classrooms, logging into the Zooms and talking to each student individually, going in, having staff go into the high schools. And while that's perhaps labor intensive and may require an investment, these are our students who are not receiving all of the funding they could be. And in the end, it's CUNY missing out on money. And so I would like to really like to hear more about what proactive efforts CUNY can and should be doing to really do that outreach so that no money is left on the table, both for the sake of our students and for the sake of CUNY as a whole. We're missing out on federal, it feels like we could be missing out on federal funding.
So I am totally in agreement with you. And I said, we have parts of our teams working with the DOE. It's part of the things, for example, that we do with the students who participate in College Now. We also had a pilot of a FAFSA Nudge initiative to make sure that the students sort of remember to fill out those forms. We also provide some additional support. Sometimes some students, for example, are worrisome about all the questions, right, that they have to provide, or they're in households where there's controversy and it's not easy to get the documentation that they need for that. But we've had a number of initiatives once they're in CUNY, right? But to your point, in partnership with the DOE to encourage that, and we're gladly to explore additional measures. So like you say, like the first objective is to keep the education of the students going, right? That's the big goal, but it's also financially beneficial to us in terms of being able to meet our financial obligations. So thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, and this will be my last question this round, then I want to turn it over to my colleagues, but this will be a question I ask about other programs. Do you evaluate, you mentioned a number of different initiatives and programs to engage students in FAFSA. You mentioned FAFSA Nudge, which is did I get there? FAFSA Nudge?
Mhm.
That's a great name. Do you evaluate the effectiveness of these programs?
Clearly, in the case of the FAFSA Nudge, and we'll be happy to sort of provide more information, it began as a pilot, and based on whether we felt that we were getting the positive results that we did, we decided that it's something that we needed to scale up. So absolutely, we're always trying to measure many of these things so that we can be really targeted and effective in getting the results that we want.
And is there any funding associated with investing in FAFSA Nudge and these other initiatives that you referenced?
So we do that sometimes we get outside grants to do some of these things, right? So we go into our philanthropic efforts, and there's some funders in the city who have been incredibly helpful in this journey. I mean, I'll give you the example of Robin Hood and others. Think about ASAP, that began as a pilot, right? And it's grown to be a nationally replicated model. And it had, in the fundraising that we did, money specifically designed to evaluate, right, the effectiveness. And so some of those things, at times we get grants for some of those projects. In other times we use part of our internal staff to be able to make those assessments.
Thank you. I want to leave it there for now because I want to turn it over to my colleagues for their questions. I see Councilmember Barron has his hand up, so I'd like to turn it over to him.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to say this off the top, Chancellor, that first I want to observe just the people that you have here presenting or supporting you is reflective of the neglect of Black leadership in CUNY. You don't have a single person that I would think would call themselves African or African-American right before us in these high positions. And the Black faculty is a major problem. Why? There's no excuse for it. We've been talking about this for decades. And here you come before a city that has over 2-point-some-odd million Black people in it, a whole lot of Black people in CUNY, and not one of the people that you're presenting here doesn't appear to be an African-American, a Black person. That's unconscionable and unacceptable. And it has to stop, not with rhetoric, not with you giving me some Blacks on a lower position and say, I have a Black this and a Black that, and much lower, powerless positions. That has to stop. I want you to respond to that. I also want you to respond to the New Deal, a part of the collective bargain agreement that we are very much supportive of. And the New Deal for CUNY is free tuition and a whole other pieces to it. I think it's time to take free tuition very serious. I've been a CUNY chair for 12 years and my wife 8 years, and we've been fighting for free tuition ever since. Now is the time that we can really get it with a serious response to this CUNY New Deal. And I'm hoping that you can put a committee together and all of us get together and meet around that New Deal, as well as it being a part of the collective bargaining agreement. Third, tuition increase. I was very disappointed in the state allowing you to increase the tuition by $200 every other year or every year. I'm hoping you do not exercise that. Fourth, I'm concerned about the $46 million worth of council initiatives. You know, that's usually not included in the budget, and that becomes the focus of the annual budget dance that we talk about $46 million out of a $98 billion city budget. And when I was there, it was 56, almost 60 million. Now I see it's down to 46 million for council initiatives. So I'm hoping that that gets increased, and I'm hoping that we can baseline some things. I think the Black Male Initiative is still baseline, but those kinds of things. 5, childcare services. My wife fought hard for childcare services. CUNY students need that badly. We need to fight for childcare services, increase funding there, and food insecurity. That's another big challenge that we have to deal with, the food insecurity. And then overall, in CUNY, I have to get some clarity for you and me. I did get $20 million secured for a Martin Luther King Scholarship Fund from the state to deal with non-tuition costs. You know, a lot of our students, the TAP is taking care of their tuition. And then the TAP gap, we was fighting for more money on the state to help close the TAP gap. And I think we worked something out there. But when you add textbooks and you add the fees and food and childcare, the non-tuition cost is greater than the tuition for poor, struggling Black and brown students in particular. So I think that needs to be, and the Excelsior Scholarship should not have happened, in my opinion. The governor put $124 million in when I was up there the last minute, and that's for students, you know, from families making $125,000. And yet, when it came to other parts of the budget where it was a greater need, that didn't happen. So Excelsior was really his way. Then he says there's free tuition. How is there free tuition when you got to raise scholarship money to pay tuition? It should be a non-tuition, and tuition should be finally eradicated from CUNY. So I think these things need to be seriously taken into consideration. No lip service, no, you know, playing it off to some low-level Blacks that you have in positions. But this is an indication that there has been no major change in that you can't find one, not one, that you can bring in a high-level position to come before us in this committee.
So thank you, Councilman Barron, for your questions. I always like to remind our elected officials of the number of students. So on behalf of the 4,038 CUNY students that live in your district, thank you for your support. I will have a different take on some of the things that you identify. I am very proud to have assembled the most diverse team in both the senior leadership in the university and in our campuses that reflect our city.
How many Black presidents do you have?
There's 6. The largest number of CUNY Black
and how many Blacks do you have in your top executive position? Like these folk here.
Well, we don't all fit. The cabinet doesn't.
We don't
fit
all fit. That's interesting.
Right? The general counsel, which I would not consider to be this position, is an African American man, the first time in the history of the university. Senior Vice Chancellor Glenda Grace, who works in external affairs, is also African American. So we have the largest number of African American vice chancellors in the chancellor's team. So
not in the high executive positions like these.
Well, the general counsel to me, you know, is a lawyer. That seems to be pretty high power to me. So
in here
again, and 6 presidents, the largest in the history and in our ECP too. So
how many universities do you have? 22?
There's 25 campuses.
25 campuses, 6 presidents. Pat yourself on the back if you want, but there is how many, what's the percentage of the Black and brown students is there as much higher than the amount represented in leadership?
So
but go ahead.
And we've done increasingly work on our faculty diversity. So I am on that record, much needs to be done, but incredibly proud.
How many more Black faculty did you hire?
I can get you those numbers. The number of overall minority faculty has increased.
Not minority, Black.
I can get you all those numbers.
Not minority, not diversity, Black.
We can get you those numbers.
We get lost in diversity and we get lost in minority.
Let me also move to some of the things in your questions. I want to make sure that I'm responsive to them. First, there must have been some confusion. The university did not ask for a tuition increase this year. We've actually have not had a tuition increase for the 4-year schools for the past, this will be the 3rd year, and there has not been an increase in the tuition in the community colleges for 5 years, right? So there's been no tuition increase, none was requested, and none has been had in the last.
But you still have the power to do it, but I'm glad you didn't use it.
That's the key.
That's what I was asking, because you do have the power to do it.
We have not used it, and we have not used it for 3 years in the 4-year schools and 5
That's
years
good.
in the 2-year schools, right?
That's a good thing.
Food insecurity is a big concern. It was a big concern before the pandemic. It's a concern that got increased. We did a number of changes in our policies. For example, we made all the food pantries available. Before, many of the pantries, if you were a Baruch student, you have to go to the Baruch food pantry. Based on the feedback of our student leaders, we open all the food pantries to students all across the system. So any student can go to the pantry that was most convenient to them. We've also been very aggressive in trying to get our students, going back to the point that the chair made about not leaving any money on the table to increase the number of students who are eligible for SNAP to be able to have those benefits. I actually had a meeting last week with the commissioner for social services so that we can work together in a campaign to make sure that every student in CUNY that qualifies for SNAP knows about it and is able to take advantage of those benefits. The city council has also, for the past 3 years, supported a food initiative to provide vouchers to the students in the community colleges who have food insecurity. So we continue to increase, and we're looking for partnerships with other organizations to address that issue of food insecurity, and in full agreement with you about the need. And we put it in our budget request for additional child services, childcare services for our students.
What about the new deal and free tuition?
So we are supportive of many of the goals of the New Deal, particularly sort of the request for additional full-time faculty that we put in our budget request, and some of that was addressed also by the governor's executive budget. Additional personnel also in mental health. The New Deal speaks to the issue of academic counselors. I always like to point out that we need also career service counselors so we can connect our students to internships, paid internships, apprenticeships, and all of that. So there's a lot of common ground on that field, and any expansion of our already 68% of the students who do not pay any tuition and the 75% who graduate debt-free would be an advantageous situation.
Yes, but a lot of students, there's another 20–30% of the students that do pay tuition. And if it was a tuition-free university, remember when the university first started, when whites were predominantly in the university, it was not free tuition, it was a free university. They didn't have tuition. So if it could work then when the white immigrants were coming in, then it can work now, because the same money that we're putting into TAP and all of this stuff, if you put that into the budget and don't charge tuition, you should at least be open to sit down and let's put a committee together to discuss the realization of free tuition. Because when you look at the dynamics of it, if you just don't brush it off and really stay open, you'll be surprised. It worked in the past when CUNY imposed tuition when we start coming in, people of color. That's in the 70s. That's when tuition was imposed. Prior to that, when it first started, it was a free academy. So if it could work for whites, why can't it work now? And you should be open for it to at least have a great discussion on it so that we can see if in fact we can realize free tuition.
So Councilman, delighted always to engage in a conversation of additional affordability for our students.
Would you be willing to set up a committee on free tuition out of your office?
We'll be happy to participate in that. If that's also something that the council does, we'll be happy to provide whatever information is needed for that conversation.
I didn't say provide information, that's provide leadership. You provide leadership, not information.
And to be able to get to the policy details, you need information. So we'll be happy to participate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Barron. And just to follow up on the diversity, I'll be asking more questions about that later. But the committee is interested on the diversity of the leadership and of the faculty. I want to call on Councilmember Felice to next.
Starting time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair Dinowitz, for this hearing. And also thank you, Chancellor, for the testimony and also all the information that you provided. CUNY is a ladder of opportunity. CUNY is literally a ladder of opportunity. As a Bronxite, I have seen so many neighbors, so many friends, even family members climb the economic ladder. And I have personally seen how CUNY has almost always played a role. So I want to thank all of you for everything that you do for CUNY and also for our students, AKA our future. And also thank you for sharing information about your priorities, including the nursing building at Lehman College, many exciting projects at Bronx Community College and hostels and much more. The first question is about general capital priorities. What are factors that are considered when determining capital priorities? So for example, there's a new nursing school building at Lehman College. I'm sure that demand was something that was considered. So just curious, could you provide a general list of factors that you consider when determining capital priorities, including new buildings and much more?
Well, thank you for that question. And again, thank you on behalf of the 4,641 CUNY students that live in your district, and for your connection with CUNY, Councilman Feliz. In terms of capital, our colleges have master plans that sort of dictate, right, the growth of the campus, and they have sort of a programmatic way in which they have they deal with their existing critical maintenance needs or additional facilities that might be needed. So those are the main guides that guide the university. And happy to. I'm sure you've seen the 5-year sort of capital budget plan that CUNY puts together, in which you can see the sequencing of the master plan and of the request. So that's one guiding principle in moving forward. In the past couple of years, for example, we have prioritized a lot of critical maintenance. In the last 2 years, a lot of critical maintenance associated also with ventilation and HVAC and other things because of the what we have learned about the transmission in the pandemic, and we want to continue to be doing more in a proactive way moving forward, particularly with some of our buildings that might be older. We look at also growing demands in the marketplace. The commentary that I made in my testimony, for example, about the request for the new allied health building at Hostos comes from the master plan process at Hostos and the need for additional space, in this case for training space for areas that are of critical need in our city, like nurses, paramedic, RAC technicians, and the expansions of programs at Hostos. So you have both a combination of the master plans, market force demand, right, for programs, the age in the infrastructure in many of the campuses, and I know that is work that both our Vice Chancellor Atala, who joined us, recently at the university, and the CO have been working with many of our presidents in our campuses.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And by the way, I'm a proud Bronx Community College graduate. I think there's many new projects, including that large, beautiful library that I'm very proud to have in the Bronx. But there's a building all the way in the back of the campus. I forgot the name, not Carmen Hall, the one all the way in the back on the Sedgwick side, which desperately needs capital improvements, just an FYI. But second question, and I have very limited time. Question on tuition. Out of all community college students, approximately how many students or what percentage of students have their tuition fully covered by TAP, Pell, or the state program or any other program? Approximately what percentage have their tuition fully covered or nearly fully covered?
It is around 75% in the community college, about 68 system-wide.
Time expired.
Council Member Denoritz, if I could just ask one final question, which shouldn't take so long.
Absolutely, Councilmember Feliz. Professor.
Thank you so much. Final question on the pandemic and also catch-up work. The pandemic obviously affected our lives in every possible way, in more ways than we can imagine. It affected all of us, but including struggling students and especially students that are learning English as a second language. We obviously have a lot of catch-up work, including those students that are taking classes that were traditionally referred to as remedial classes. So a lot of catch-up work to do. Just curious, can you explain what we're doing to help those struggling students catch up, including those that are struggling with English as a second language, but also math, reading, writing?
So, I mean, part of the challenge is now sort of receiving the students a lot more in person and making an assessment of that, and working with those students to see where their needs might be. So that's happening on a daily basis on our campus. So that's one layer of the work that we're doing. We're also working with the DOE to be able to see, what needs the students who are about to graduate have, so we can create some programs, some bridge programs over the summer, and we can use some time to be able to, help them in that transition. And the other part, Councilman, is that we also have students that we lost, right? That we lost to the pandemic, so that we need to bring them back, right? And many of them, because of either the loss of jobs in the family, childcare situations, employment situations, health situations, they might have decided to stop their education. We need to bring them back too. So we have a number of programs, some in connection with the DOE, that we're looking at this learning loss and what we might need to do to bring the students back. But it is a real issue on the remediation side too. For example, we're also, as we move, and the council has been incredibly supportive in our efforts to rethink remediation work on our campuses. And we're about to get to a place where we have almost no remediation and is everything co-curricular, which the data shows is a much better way to get the students to advance. But one of the areas, for example, where we still need to do some work in that front is with the students that are ESL, right? English language learners, right? So that's work that we're doing right now to make sure that that segment of the population is well served by this new co-curricular structure of remediation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Feliz. I do want to follow up on one point Councilmember Feliz made, and then I'm going to call on Councilmember Brewer. You spoke about, he asked a question about new capital or capital needs, and you spoke about the people you speak to determine these needs, and you mentioned nursing and lab techs. I'm just wondering who you speak to determine these needs, who specifically?
Labor market needs.
Right.
So we use both data from the federal, state, and city departments of labor, which provide data on labor market trends. Is something that we provide to all our campuses. It's used in the assessment of the creation of new academic programs. It's sort of used then to guide potential enrollment trends in thinking about physical space. And then
you said federal data from the federal government?
It's federal, state, and city data on labor market trends, yes. And then we also have conversations with employers, right? We get information about the market trends that they see, and this happens at times. Many academic programs, particularly the ones in STEM, have an advisory group, which is folks in industry. So that feedback comes into the programs, and we're doing more formally in our work centrally. For example, the new New York City CEO Jobs Council that we began working, that was the lead of 33 companies under Jamie Dimon. Some of the new micro-credentials and programs that we launched was based with a specific feedback coming from the HR departments in those companies.
Great. And just a big shout out to the Bronx as well. I got Lehman in my district, and it's good to see the investment that you mentioned in your opening statement from Hostos and Lehman. Of course, the nursing program at Lehman. I'm going to ask more about that, but I know how important nursing is to CUNY. But I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Brewer.
Starting time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chancellor, for many different things. I think, first of all, thank you for the work on CUNY in the Heights. I think it's going well. Great dean there. And although that's not my district anymore, I still care, as does Alden Bonilla and everybody else who cares about CUNY in the Heights. So thank you. So I have a few questions. First of all, we just had a hearing on workforce development, and CUNY comes up often. I know there are several different programs. I am a Ken Adams fan. Congratulations on making him head of LaGuardia Community College. And I guess I would just say whatever Ken Adams wants, I would do. And one of the things that he wants, because he can do workforce in his head. And one of the things he wants is to get funding. It's good that the governor's doing part-time students or support, excellent, but that doesn't count the non-matriculating certificate, I'm making this up, for electricians and plumbers and maybe home health aides, et cetera, where the jobs, I mean, they're just begging, and the list goes on and on. To get the certification, you have to pay for it because there isn't any, that doesn't count towards the part-time matriculating student. So my question is, how are you going to help 7 community colleges? They could all be doing this. They all have great leaders. So what are we doing to support that program?
So thank you for your question and support. Thank you also on behalf of the 1,488 and 18 CUNY students living.
You got too many numbers there, Chancellor. Go ahead.
It's 1,418, but
and a million professors too. Go ahead.
That too. So we're doing a number of things, right? There is the proposal which is being evaluated, which is part of the executive budget, to be able to use TAP for those kinds of credentials. That'll be a great step in the right direction.
Yeah.
We've also, the federal government doesn't provide that flexibility with Pell. It'd be great at the federal level if we had that kind of flexibility for those programs. So that is something that we can all lobby for in DC. For that level of flexibility for the programs, right? The other way is also we partner, for example, with our friends in labor, right? Which we create programs with them, and in many cases they provide the funding for their members to be able to participate in trainings like this. And then there's additional philanthropic funds that we raised over time to be able to provide that. The challenge with the philanthropic funding stream is that it's not, it's not certain moving forward. The best would be
it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable.
The best would be that we had, as part of our federal, city, and state support for higher ed, that those programs would be included.
Okay, but I'm saying we need you to lobby for them too, and we need some money for them. And I can't tell you how important it is. Everybody talk, but we need to actually do that for these kinds of programs. Okay, number one. Number two. Go ahead.
That at the federal level and at the state level too. So I'm with you.
Okay, and just along those lines, because I've been talking to everybody about workforce because I know everybody. So I called everybody to find out how to do workforce. I think there are about 50,000, I'm guessing, sort of graduates, better than I, every year. And the other thing that should happen is, I'm making numbers up now, say 30,000 of them get jobs on their own, or say 20,000 get jobs on their own or their careers, whatever they want to do. As you know, I teach at Hunter, and a lot of them go off to grad school or whatever. But the issue is everybody else. We should mandate, I'd love to make a law, that corporations should hire, this is the best student in the world. This is the New Yorker. This is the person who's going to be, the best citizen, the best resident, the best everything. We should mandate that the rest of the graduates be hired by the corporations or the businesses that they, where they want to work in the city of New York. So how are we going to, what kind of support? We have to be drastic, because these corporations, they go to the private colleges. We know how they are, but we need to make sure that they hire CUNY. So is there any, I know you work out, I know you try to get funding, you try to work with these corporations, but is there anything we're doing to try to get more corporations or whatever people want to do? I use corporate business in the general sense that they want, that they should be hiring CUNY students. What are we doing along those lines?
So again, the legislation side are things that I leave to you all to do, but we've been partnering a lot more closely with industry, and I think it's both an effort of our outreach and also industry coming, recognizing the talent that we have at CUNY. The CEO Jobs Council is an example of one initiative. It was a conversation, but the driver were the employers in the companies and the leadership in this case of
Time expired.
and coming to us. We have many with Centerbridge, Goldman Sachs, many companies are coming to us to do that. What we want is additional support in the staffing to then make the matchmaking, to have our students be ready for those opportunities, right? In terms of their resume, their interview skills, all those things, right? In addition to their coursework, but then also so that we can have staff that when the companies come to us, that then we can provide that matchmaking, and that will be really, really beneficial in that line of work. But it is one of my highest priorities to sort of increase that connection of our students with the world of work.
Okay. I know you mentioned about Gutman, you know, I'm a big supporter. I know you said more lease space. I think that just means more space around 40th Street. So what does that mean? And then second, what's going on with the North Building for them and John Jay and blah, blah, blah?
We're trying to finalize that so that can be the permanent home. While we get that finalized, we need to make sure they get the space they need around 42nd Street. But we're working very hard, and I just visited the campus 2 weeks ago. I had a lovely visit with them, and we're trying to secure that campus, and North Hall will be the perfect spot.
But what's the status of North Hall? Is it at dormitory authority? Is it, I mean, and also above it, we would like to have some affordable housing, not just condos. So where are we with that kind of discussion?
We'll put that in the mix. We have to do, we're finalizing with the state, and so to put out a request for proposals to see what combination we can have there that will be able to address needs like the ones that you identify, and then our own programmatic space needs like the ones for government.
Okay. I know the chair asked about Excelsior and other opportunities for students. I think some of the Excelsior money, students didn't like it and they returned the money. So when you get him some statistics, I'd love to know, you know, who did that. Some of my students said very bad words, I won't repeat them, about Excelsior. And then said, you know, I want out of here. So I just would love to know at some point the status, if there was return funding on Excelsior. They really did not like that program.
We will get that, and actually 6,018 students were in Excelsior in 2021, to the question of the chair.
Okay.
But I'll look into that. That is not something that I was aware of, but I'll look into that, Councilwoman.
Maybe it's just my students because they're very challenging, which is what I like. So now, of course, the big question, Hunter's hole in the ground. So you know you're going to get this question. So what's the status? It's $800 million. It's incredibly important, not just for nurses, but for life sciences for Hunter, not life sciences for the private sector. And I really want to hear what we're going to do to make sure that Hunter gets this building. So I'm ready to listen. Needless to say, the chair is interested, I'm interested, and we're going to get this done. So what are your plans?
So we're on the same page. We're trying to do a number of things. One is to get additional capital dollars, whatever the final cost would be for the building there, so that we can do that. So we're trying to revitalize that and get the funding to get it done.
Okay, but that means, are we lobbying the governor? We need 800 million. We have as you know, the president has maybe 20 million of private money if in fact the project goes forward, because she needs to do a new, I guess I call it EIS, a new assessment. So, I mean, that's good that we're lobbying. How do we get it off the ground?
That building was part of our state capital request. So it's one of, if you go to our capital priorities, it's one of them.
Okay, all right. I mean, all right. Do you think we should be putting some city money into this also?
We welcome all money.
I know you do, but specifically for this project, because everybody has their favorite projects, and you do also. And I want this project to be, I know you have many children because you have all your different campuses, but I want this project, because it would be good for the city, not just for Hunter. I want this project to be one of your top priorities. I know you have many.
We included as one of the top priorities in our funding requests this year.
Okay. I mean, we're not going to give up. I think you know that. So I want you to know that this is incredibly important. And every time you're talking about to anybody that we should be at the state or city level, I hope you've mentioned this, but I didn't hear it in your opening statement. Maybe I missed it, but it needs to be there. I really will not give up, nor will the president of Hunter College, as you know.
Well, we all want those resources for the Hunter faculty, so we are on the same page.
All right, and then you have to figure out how you're going to switch the Brookdale nurses, sanitation garage. None of that's going to happen unless this project goes forward. And I assume you're making that clear to anybody who asks, since I know every inch of that project, right? There's a lot of switching around that cannot happen. I hope you say that to the mayor, and because he could help us with the governor also. I've spoken to the governor. I've done as much as I can, but there's a lot of moving parts that can't move until this project is done. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to take any more time. I could take too much. Thank you.
I know. Thank you, Council Member Burr. I'm the most surprising thing about your questioning was that you didn't repeat what the students said. Very surprising. Chancellor, thank you for sharing the number of students on the Excelsior Scholarship. At some point, I'd also like to know how many students actually qualify for the Excelsior Scholarship. I'm sure you've been getting all these great numbers during the hearing. I'm sure that'll be an additional one. I'd now like to turn it over to Councilmember Vernikoff for her questions.
Starting time.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Chair Dinowitz, and thank you, Chancellor Rodriguez, for your testimony. And also thank you for everything you do for CUNY and CUNY students. I'm a proud graduate of CUNY, Baruch College. So yeah, thank you for that. I have pretty fond memories from my time there. My question is as follows. I've been for a long time working with the issue of anti-Semitism, and I've received throughout the last several years many complaints about anti-Semitism on several CUNY campuses, especially at Hunter, John Jay, and some of them are about swastikas being drawn in bathrooms. Some of them are about harassment in social media. There's a lot of harassment against Jewish students by the group called SJP, Students in Justice for Palestine. There is harassment against students who are pro-Israel. Students do not feel comfortable being pro-Israel on CUNY campus. So my first question is there a mechanism in place at CUNY to document anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic incidents?
So thank you for your question. And since I've mentioned all the city council number of students, thank you on behalf of the 5,016 CUNY students that live in your district as an alum. And we're also very concerned on the rise of anti-Semitic activity. You know, it's a nationwide, citywide, and then it hits us at CUNY as part of that trend. The education, it is one of the most important ways in which we can fight, right? Intolerance and hatred. So higher education is a key part of the solution of how we have either none of that, right, or much less of those cases. Students can't report cases of anti-Semitism depending on the situation. It is something that we work with the local precinct. If it is something that, you know, it can be connected as a hate crime, we cooperate with the police in investigations. That happens to be the case, for example, when we have graffiti like the one that you identify is one of the things that we work. But we have our campuses working very, very hard in programs that try to create the right climate in each of the campuses. I can give you examples in, I believe it's part of your district, in Kingsborough Community College. The president has been working very closely with our friends in the Jewish Community Relations Council, JCRC, to give capacity to the student affairs personnel in working with the student body in addressing things like this, preventing them from occurring. I know the Brooklyn College president has had a long series of programs targeted around that. When I was at Queens College, we had the Center for Ethnic, Religious, and Racial Understanding, which was a program that was created out of the Center for Jewish Studies that work in building bridges among all groups. Actually, the City Council is one of the things in my testimony, has been providing $500,000 so we can replicate the work done by that program in other CUNY campuses. The Kupferberg Center at Queensboro, also very active in promoting talks and meetings and difficult conversations to prevent anti-Semitic behavior. And then in the cases where it occurs, we encourage people to speak out, and we collaborate with our own CUNY teams and with other entities, like I mentioned, in this case with the hate crime unit, if appropriate. And I'll be happy.
Sorry.
To provide you with a listing of some of the things that the campuses are doing on this initiative, because I know that you've been very concerned about that, and rightfully so.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely appreciate that, and I would love to see that. And thank you again for the work you're doing against it. My question was more a little bit about the documenting of anti-Semitism. Do you have a mechanism in place to document the specific incidents of anti-Semitism?
So the campuses have it can be both, depending on the kind of situation. It is something that can rise as students can go to usually it's through the affirmative action officer when they sort of see any form of discrimination. If it raises to the category.
Time expired.
We work with,
Chair, can I have a little more time, please?
Absolutely.
With our campus police, and then our presidents have been also very active at times in leading campus events when those things occur.
I understand that, but is there a document? Is there a mechanism that documents it? Meaning, can we see? Is there a document where we can look at and see how many incidents of anti-Semitism have occurred on each campus?
So I can get you information that's probably now on there, some different buckets. So we have to sort of put it all together, but I'll be happy to do that for you.
Please, thank you. And then one more question. Are there any consequences that students face for harassment of other students? I understand it might be a little complicated with free speech, but is there anything in place in terms of consequences for students who harass Jewish students on campus?
So, I mean, all these things that, we conduct investigations. I can give you examples of investigations that we have done, for example, situations in which, sort of faculty have been disciplined for things that happen in a classroom. If it's on the student side, it'd be under the student side of conduct, right? Which is the way in which we navigate with these things. So those are the ways in which those things will be handled, after our investigation is conducted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vernikov. Just to follow up what was a few things. One, what was not mentioned is one of the CUNYs that's under federal investigation for its anti-Semitism or lack of response to it, rather. And I do want to highlight that some of the incidents that Councilmember Vernikov referenced are very hard to quantify when you talk about implicit bias and the silencing of Jewish students, and this, that is very hard to quantify. This is in fact an issue that this committee will take up in the future, but I thank Councilmember Vernikov for your bringing it up now, and of course the Chancellor for your understanding and the work you've done to start to address this very serious issue. Anti-Semitism is a problem on our CUNY campuses. It is a problem throughout our entire city and our country. And all you have to do is look at the hate crime statistics to know that anti-Semitism is a serious issue. I want to ask a few more questions, and then Councilmember Felice, we'll get back to your second round of questions. You had mentioned something about working with the DOE to look at the needs, what needs the graduates have. I wrote down that phrase because it was very interesting. I want to relate this back to one of the programs with regard to its budget. CUNY Tutor Corps is one of the programs that goes into middle and high schools and has CUNY students tutoring our middle schools and high schoolers. CUNY Start and Math Start is a program that provides instruction that, in all honesty, the DOE should have provided our students, but you make up for that with that sort of remedial instruction. Which of these programs and other programs like ASAP are looking at cuts in this preliminary budget?
I don't think ASAP is facing a cut. I can get you, let me get you the list. I mean, going back to your question about the budget and proposed, so I can get you a right answer. And let me,
Okay.
if you don't mind, one thing that I like to say, right? And I know it's a key concern of yours, and so it's for the entire university. Any kind of anti-Semitic incident on a campus. But you mentioned that campuses were under federal investigation, right? And people use that phrase, and it sounds right. And the precise item is that there's been complaints launched before the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Education, and the complaints have not been adjudicated, right? So we do not know whether the complaint was validated or not. And I just want to make sure that we have the right language, right? Not to minimize anything, but when somebody says that an institution is under federal investigation, it just leaves a cloud that I just want to put some precision so that everybody's clear as to what's happening.
Okay, thank you for your clarification on that issue. So to take it back to the budget, do you have it? What are the programmatic reductions, right? So you said ASAP is not facing cuts, but Tutor Corps, CUNY Culture Corps, other CUNY centers and institutes, incubators, Algebra for All, are any of these programs, what is actually being cut?
So I think the easiest thing would be to provide you for a list, because there's some things that I included some in my testimony, the things that were, for example, need restoration.
Mm-hmm.
I can think about the tech incubators in Staten Island, Queens, and the Bronx, for example. I do know, and that's something that is included in the testimony. I think the best way to address that, if I can have, two lists, and that way you can have the complete list of those things. My recollection is, for example, that the culture cores were baseline in the budget. But instead of going from memory, I'd rather have a thorough checklist so you can have that. I think it'd be a much more effective way to respond to your question, if you don't mind.
Okay, I thank you. I want to go back to that phrase you said, what needs graduates have. I said I was going to bring this up again this hearing. I brought it up at the last hearing, in that when you have programs like the CUNY Tutor Corps, you're addressing those issues before students graduate high school, or to borrow a phrase, you're addressing those needs upstream, which is a phrase our mayor frequently uses, and I think it's appropriate. And I would hope that in your work with the DOE and in the funding that you're requesting, we're going to work together to make sure that relationship is there, and that information is shared, and that there is a huge investment in programs that benefit CUNY students and benefit our younger DOE students long before they reach graduation. Because once they reach graduation, it's figuring out a whole host of issues, like, do they need remediation, and what does that remediation look like? You spoke earlier about the FAFSA nudge, figuring that all out when someone's a senior or already after they've graduated, not to mention the issues that have been brought up with students with disabilities and Ls. So I encourage that work to continue, and for you to advocate for that investment in a sort of continuum of services.
And let me just say that not only are you dead on about not leaving money on the table and making that connection, but the example of the CUNY Tutor Corps is the perfect one for the reasons that you identified, right? That the getting to the DOE students before right? They come to CUNY, they get a mentor, they get a role model. But one of the things that I like is that is a form of a paid internship. And as you know, paid internships is one of the things that I want to emphasize, because we know that we had the data on the paid interns, right? The paid internships, those students that receive it on the college side, they tend to graduate faster. And when they do graduate, right, when they go into the job market, they get a job faster and their first time pay is higher. So we know we have good data on that. So if we can add that component to the programmatic element that you're describing about working with the DOE and getting to those students early, right, and making sure there's no summer melt, like the grant that we have for the summer bridge with the DOE, those things are win-wins all over. And we need to have a lot more of that.
And I certainly think having that data is a great tool in advocating for these needs. And also when we look at these needs citywide, you imagine a student who graduates on time. We already have a large number of CUNY students facing homelessness. What is it, 50% make 30,000, or their families make 30,000 or less. But I think armed with this data is really making the case for heavy investment in CUNY, because the students graduating on time, graduating with higher degrees are going to make more. Guess what? They are less likely to face homelessness or housing struggles. And that is, overall in a great, in a more broad vision of our city, that's exactly what we need. We need to be investing in our students, and it pays dividends well down the line. I want to take it back to Councilmember Felice, who has his hand up.
Starting time.
Thank you so much, Chair Denowitz. Wanted to thank all my colleagues for all the questions. I wanted to ask a similar line of questions as my colleague, Councilmember Gilbrewer. Wanted to ask some additional questions about capital improvements, but specifically Bronx Community College. BCC serves some of our most disadvantaged students, some of our most struggling, and some of our poorest students. And it's opened a lot of doors to these struggling communities and students. But I'm concerned about one of its buildings, Colston Hall, which is the building that I meant to say earlier, not Carmen Hall. Carmen is in Lehman College. That's where most of my classes were at, so I can't get the name out of my head. But Colston Hall in Bronx Community College, which is the building all the way in the back of the campus. It's a building that's in desperate need of renovations. Many outdated classrooms. The classrooms are tiny. The soundproofing of the classrooms and the spaces is horrible. And again, BCC serves some of our most struggling students. And I think that building specifically, the classrooms in that building are spaces that might not be the best spaces for learning. So I'm just wondering, is that a building that the administration has considered or talked about for potential improvements?
So as much as I'm familiar with the BCC campus and many of our campuses, right, I think that the best way for me would be to sort of circle back and get you some detailed information on that particular building. Overall, Bronx Community is one of our campuses that has beautiful but dated architecture, right? And we're trying to make up for a lot of years of neglect in terms of critical maintenance, and we've sort of been prioritizing that campus, not just because of the beauty of the buildings, but because of the health and safety of our students there. So if you would allow me to get the particular information about that building, I'll be happy to do so.
Thank you so much. And also, can we count on you and your administration potentially taking a hard look at that building and potentially making it a priority for capital improvements if needed and appropriate?
We'll certainly take a look at it. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm unmuted, right? Okay.
Oh, you're okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Councilmember. I just want to take it back to workforce development. You're speaking about it in the context of capital. You spoke about hospital workers and tech workers, but there's a shortage of other professions. There is a shortage of teachers. There's a shortage of social workers. And what's especially troubling in the Bronx is a shortage of early intervention specialists. This particularly impacts the Bronx, where a significant number of children, our most vulnerable children, are not receiving their services in a timely fashion. And this is in part due to the lack of professionals who can do this work. And so in addition to the areas you mentioned, what investment is CUNY making to ensure that these jobs are attractive and get filled, and that we actually have people getting their degrees in the jobs that our city needs?
Well, thank you for making that comment, because I think at times when we talk about workforce, people tend to think about just tech, right? Or they think about allied health, because those are main drivers of the economy. But as you said, there is, given the pandemic, and this is happening all across the economy, right? That many individuals are rethinking whether they're going to continue working or not, and a lot of retirements. That's happening in education. So we need to, if there was need before, that need gets exacerbated as a result of the pandemic. When you talk about the early intervention specialists, that's always been an area of great need. And when you think about the cultural appropriateness, those individuals who speak the languages that serve the community, that's even a greater need. I'll be happy to get you a sense of our numbers of the students in those programs, and some of the efforts that we're doing along recruitment, because they're really, really important, and they're going to become even more important, I think, as the DOE faces some retirements, and we're going to need to be able, it's a great opportunity to have the students get interested in these fields and do that.
Right. Again, it's that, again, to borrow the phrase from the mayor, it's this upstream mentality. But it doesn't, like I said, I think you articulated it well. We often hear about the tech, well, we don't hear about public sector workers. And so I would like to hear not just how many students there are in these programs that address the needs of our youngest, most vulnerable children, often with disabilities, but what, again, is these proactive efforts to recruit people. If there's a program, if there's additional tuition assistance, if there's some sort of stipend, as you mentioned, paid internships. One of the programs that I like to reference is a program that I actually did. It's the New York City Teaching Fellows. It's a specific program to meet a specific need, which is high needs subject area. Mine was special education. And high needs neighborhood. Mine was the Bronx. Mine was my home district. And there were financial, incentives. They subsidized our masters, right? They guided us through the process, and we got jobs right away. It was a very good program that met a specific need in the city. And so what I'm interested in is, are there any other efforts like that for and many of the other needs we have in the city, like early intervention specialists?
And we do have a number of programs. I'll be happy to provide that information for you. If in this new role, you are helpful to us in identifying additional resources so that we can create the incentives, the stipends, the fellowships to get more students to do that. Again, we'll be delighted to partner, because the need has been there and the need is real. And one of the great things that CUNY has is that when so many, right, probably a large majority of the teachers in the system are CUNY grads, right, that can be one element of connecting new generations of students to be able to take these roles and put the seed about potentially becoming a teacher early on in their minds.
Yeah, it's very important. We are facing shortages, early intervention, nursing, teaching, social workers. All of these, I think, can and should be addressed at the city university, right? The city university should be meeting the needs of our city. And, I know you're looking at federal, state, and city data to look at the trends in what capital needs to be built. I'd lean a little heavier on that city data. because that's who we are, and that's what we need to address here in the city. I do want to ask, just follow up on Councilmember Barron's questions, in asking in what ways CUNY is working to increase the diversity among the tenured faculty. You did list that the staff is very diverse, that the senior staff, and I'm interested to know what efforts are being made to increase the diversity among tenured faculty. I know, Councilmember Barron, you were specifically talking about Black leadership. I am asking about diversity. I see you kind of wiggling there.
So I'm happy to report that, from, let's say, from 2017 to 2021, then the number of diverse faculty in CUNY grew from 35% to 38%, 38.6%. So we continue to have movement in the right direction, even at a time with the pandemic, where we were not hiring as many faculty members, right? One of the great things is to look at the trends in the hiring of the newer faculty, right? Who are going to be replacing the existing faculty, and in that, for example, we have moved from, if we take again 2016 and 17, we moved from about 38% of all the new hires were faculty of color. In the last year that we have data for 2021, it was 54%. So more than half of all the new faculty that were being hired in the last year were faculty of color, right? So that trend that has been going on for the past 4 or 5 years indicates that we continue to hire diverse faculty at an increased rate. So we continue to make those efforts. One of the things, for example, assuming that it gets included in the adopted budget, right? The request we made for that the governor included in the budget about 500 new lecturer lines. One of the things that we have provided sort of guidance to the campuses in that process is to look at the talent that we have already teaching, right, in our campuses. Many of our adjuncts that tend to be probably slightly more diverse than the full-time faculty at this point, to look at them as individuals that can be part of this talent pool, but also make sure that diversity is an important element in that selection process.
Great, and if you could provide the committee with what that diversity looks like.
Okay.
What you mean when you say people of color, how that's broken down. That's information I think we would very much appreciate.
Happy to do so
on this committee. And I'm glad to hear about your efforts to elevate adjunct faculty to full-time tenure track, because they are the ones that are doing a lot of the legwork when it comes to teaching. They're underpaid, and so I appreciate. I think that's very good for our faculty, and as mentioned earlier, their pockets, their dignity, and their mental health. But just going back to something specific, we've received testimony about individuals who were hired for what's effectively a full-time job at CUNY, but is paid half by the university and half by the Research Foundation of CUNY, actually denying them benefits of full-time positions like healthcare. How can we rectify this?
Well, the best way is when you get a case to share with us so we can look at the specifics and take the remedy. So if you can make the reference to us, we'll take a look at it and take action.
I mean, we've received this testimony. It sounds to be a little more systemic than, oh, this one person is being paid this way. Again,
without examples, it's very difficult to determine what to do. So if you have more concrete examples of that, we'll be happy to take a look at that.
Okay, let me write my note down. Right, one of the goals with our students, with our faculty. It's to make sure they all have, the dignity that comes with work. Part of that dignity means fair pay, and of course, healthcare. So we want to make sure that if our faculty are doing the work, they get compensated as such. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm just going to ask if there are any other council members who have follow-up questions. If they would use the raise hand function. I see Councilmember Barron.
Starting time.
I wanted to ask you about so-called remediation. When I was last and things may have changed, they first was trying to get rid of remediation, period. But then they said that if you need remediation, then 80% of the students graduating from the failing in New York City school system, 80% of them needed remediation to get to CUNY. And then there was a lot of non-credit and remedial courses. And they were saying at one time that the remediation had to come from, you had to go to the community colleges because they were no longer going to provide it in the four-year colleges. So I hear things have changed. So I just wanted to have you elaborate on that a little bit.
So thank you, Councilman Barron. So and this is, I think, CUNY policy from 1999 or something, that any remedial work occurs in the community colleges, right? So that continues to be the policy. One of the things in the city council's support for this, which is one of the elements that I included in my testimony about the cut restorations, going back to the questions, not just from you, but from Chair Dinowitz, is on supporting us in remediation reform. Because one of the things that we were seeing is that the students were taking remedial classes and those do not count towards, they did not get college credit, but they counted towards their financial aid, right? So you were using financial aid and not always getting college credit. So now we move to a model which is called co-curricular, which you go into a class that you get additional support, additional services, right? But it's a credit-bearing class. So when you pass that class, you get both, college-ready courses, full credit, doesn't take away from your financial aid, right? So you keep the momentum, and it's been shown to be a much more effective way to get students to get momentum going, don't use financial aid. And we're finalizing the last number of community colleges that were not using that model is being used now in this coming year. So hopefully you'll see a scenario in which the students that need that support will be coming to classes that will be counting towards their GPA and their progression for college, would not use their financial aid, let's say, in an inappropriate way. So that's one angle. The other angle that I'd like to share with you is that one of the things that I have the pleasure to discuss with Chancellor Banks and the DOE is how we can work more closely with the students sophomore, junior year in K-12, in making sure that maybe some of the things they need to get done before, so that students get to jump ready to the college of their choice when they come to CUNY.
Now, the only problem with that, because I am a CUNY grad. I graduated from New York City Community College, now it's Technical College, and I graduated from Hunter College. And I remember I had to take a whole bunch of courses just to maintain the 12 credits I needed for financial aid, and I had 18, 20 courses because there were so many non-credit courses. The problem is that they have to go to community college. There are some elite colleges that have remediation, so I don't see why we can't allow students to go straight to the four-year college and receive that kind of remedial assistance. And the reason being is because when I stopped off at the community college and got to whatever the 60 credits it was at that time, and not all of them were transferable to the four-year college. So if there were some courses that were not equal or whatever, then you lose credits in the transfer. So it's best to allow for remediation in the four-year colleges so they can get a straight four-year program and not force them into the community colleges.
Well, so I mean, in many cases, you're right about the loss of credits and transfers. Another thing that we're working very, very hard to standardize and sort of make it easier for the students to get that full transferability, so they don't lose time or financial aid. I think that the efforts to focus the expertise of what curricular work needs to be at the community colleges has probably been, good for the majority of the students who end up transferring to many of the other schools. And again, we thank the council for their support on our work.
I got all of that, but I'm saying I think you need
Time
to
expired.
change the policy, allow them to go straight to the four-year colleges, and they won't lose credits. I mean, there are elite colleges that have remediation. I don't see why four-year community colleges can't. So, I mean, we need to really consider changing that policy. Not, all the stuff you said is fine and dandy, but change the policy so they can go straight to the four-year college and not have to lose time and credit.
Thanks for your feedback.
Thank you, Councilmember Barron. Thank you.
By the way, Chair, the reason why I say I don't want to hear minority and diversity, because we get lost in that. Diversity is women, is age, is everybody. So they wind up not doing us Black people because they have so many people that can meet that diversity label or that minority label, even though whites are the minorities now in New York City. 55% of New York City is Black and brown, and they call us the majority minority, which is ridiculous. But that's why I mentioned that, Chair.
No, I understand. I know CUNY is going to get back to us with that diversity data broken down.
Thank you.
And we'll be sure to make sure that gets out to the entire committee. Chancellor, I just have a couple more questions, and then we're going to turn it over to the panel. So the standardized testing requirement was suspended during the pandemic. Is CUNY considering permanently eliminating the standardized testing requirement?
No, the mandate is very clear. We did it as an emergency measure, and so it is not permanent.
Would CUNY consider making it permanent or offering alternate measures of assessment for access to CUNY?
So the current policy is that we're going to test blind, and the idea is to use 2 years of data on that and what we have learned from the pandemic, and then make a recommendation about what the permanent policy should be.
So you are looking into it. I just want to be clear. You are looking into it, but
So
there's no decision.
The policy is test blind, which is what the majority of the campuses are using nationwide. Right? We put that in for a 2-year period, and then we'll look at the results of that, and then make any recommendation about any kind of permanent policy.
And how are you measuring those results?
Well, that is why we did it for 2 years. You need to look at how the students perform when they come in, how they progress. It takes time to be able to build the data so you can make an informed decision based on good information. It takes time to be able to ascertain that.
So what I'm really asking is, what is it you're looking at, or you're going to figure out what you're looking at in the coming months and year?
So what do you use the admission criteria for? Right? You use it to determine the students that can come in. So we're looking at the data that in this case, the test blind, the test optional, test blind policy will provide to our students to then look at, was it the right policy? Was it not the right policy? Did students succeed? Did students graduate? Which is what all colleges and universities do when they look at their at the testing admissions connected to to admissions.
So I'm just going to throw some things out here that I assume you're going to use. You're going to use GPA. You're going to use number of students who graduate in 2, 4, 6 years. Are you going to measure the number of students who get employment or their average salary compared to those who did take the test? Or are you going to look at the number of, let's say, homeless students who show incredible growth in your institution? Are you going to look at other factors like disability status? Or is it simply metrics like GPA and attendance,
I mean, we
graduation rate?
all the metrics that are appropriate. Traditionally, you use academic success, which is normally tied up to GPA, graduation, and things of that nature. Sometimes it's very difficult to make connections on gross data and items like homelessness, for example, which is a category that we do not ask, right? But it would be a comprehensive review. It's a key topic. Many colleges and universities are looking at this data too, so we're not doing this in isolation. And we're open to any suggestions that folks might have as to what things we can take into consideration.
Well, I encourage you to ask, a wide, diverse group of people for recommendations, including educators who are day in and day out with our students and see a lot more than a single test can measure, and employers who see the output, like work output of our, I guess, graduates, which is measured by more than a single exam. And of course, how that relates, how many students, I know you're a vehicle for upward mobility, how many students who would have otherwise done poorly on an SAT or ACT actually thrive when given the opportunity in a college setting. And I would also point out that universities like NYU and Harvard, which have like a somewhat decent reputation, I'd say, and Cornell, they do have an okay reputation. They've eliminated testing requirements. So I would just point that out as a concrete example of that. I want to go back one last time. I'm sorry, Chancellor.
I don't know. I mean, we'll look at all those things, and clearly that's the kind of data that we're looking at. So we are on the same page. I'm not sure. I cannot speak about NYU, but I don't think that they've done away with testing. I think they've gone test blind also, which is our policy.
Okay. All right. I just very last thing want to go back to these individuals who are hired for these full-time jobs, but paid half by the university, half for the research foundation. Well, we will, do our best to provide you with concrete examples. I'm sure that on some Excel spreadsheet somewhere lists the people who are being paid that way. I would like to work with you to address it, to ensure the employees, the workers who are doing the full-time work, who are committing themselves to our students and our university and our city, are being paid what they are due. And I'm sure that will be, you can find that somewhere. You've been able to provide a significant amount of accurate data, which I appreciate, although you didn't list for me how many CUNY students I have in my district. I know you have the information.
4,250.
There we go. So with that, I would like to, Chancellor, I would like to thank you for your testimony, for answering questions today. I am looking forward to hearing follow-up from a lot of the information that was requested during the hearing. Interim Vice Chancellor, Executive Vice Chancellor, I thank you for being here as well. I encourage you to stay to hear from our panels who have a different perspective and a lot of insight. And I'm going to turn over to Amy Briggs now for the next panel.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you, Chair Dinowitz. We have concluded the administration's testimony, so we will now be turning to public testimony. First, I would like to remind everyone that I will call up individuals in panels. Once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and you will begin your testimony once the Sergeant at Arms sets the clock and gives you the cue. All testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. Remember that there is a few second delay when you are unmuted before we can hear you. And please wait for the Sergeant at Arms to announce that you may begin before starting your testimony. The first panel of public testimony in order of speaking will be Remy Salas, Justina Jagelnika, James Davis, and Megan Ahern. I will now call on Remy Salas.
Starting time.
Thank you so much, Amy. Amy, I'm so sorry. So thank you, all the committee members here. My name is Remy Salas, but I go by as Remy. I am the campaign director for the CUNY Rising Alliance, as well as a faculty member at the Borough Manhattan Community College, as well as a proud member of the PSC CUNY Union. I'm here to express the importance of public higher education to New Yorkers. As you know, Councilmember Barron indicated, how it has changed over the years when it used to be free, and knowing how higher education has transformed other places outside of New York. I always indicate my education, I had an opportunity to go to CUNY, and that amplified my life coming from the Bronx, but also getting a free education outside of the US and in Norway, where I see how it drastically changed and how it affects their society, where the human capital over there thrives. And I can see that can happen here in New York City where our workforce in New York City is primarily almost 80% from CUNY. Or we have a CUNY, everybody has a close connection to CUNY. So I want to make sure that we should not even think about cutting any type of funding to community college, but investing directly to community college. I see how critical everyday life is for my students. And majority of my students come from my home borough in the Bronx, where they are fighting every day to get to class, fighting every day to make sure they give an opportunity for themselves and the rest of their family and their communities. But we also want to make sure that with this funding, it goes drastically into terms to helping faculty members, adjuncts that are not paid, not even close, and even losing their jobs. We want to make sure that they're heard and they're supported because they also have families and they also need the health benefits during this pandemic, as well as providing mental health resources, because even before the pandemic, even now, we needed a lot more, even the faculty members. I can say it for myself. It was a dark time during the pandemic. And now we can help faculty members as well as our students thrive, as well as the campus pantry. I see every day how it helps our students being able to concentrate, but as well as staying healthy to make sure. And CUNY has been very helpful with the student body, but we need to keep that going, as well as repairing the crumbling buildings. All right. Last year, I mean, before the pandemic, I remember that the heat was going off in my class and it was already 90 degrees. It made it unbearable for my students to learn. And we
Time expired.
You said time is expired? But I just want to make sure that we understand the importance of CUNY, and we're going to be able, and I hopefully we can continue fighting for and invest more in CUNY. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your testimony. I will now be calling on Justina Jagelnika to testify.
Starting time.
Good afternoon, Chairman Dinowitz and esteemed members of the Committee on Higher Education. My name is Justina Jagelnika, and I'm a CUNY alumna, and I currently work at the Borough of Manhattan Community College as a College Discovery Program counselor. I am a licensed mental health professional, and it is because of my CUNY education, I, an immigrant woman who decades ago did not speak English, has reached a middle-class status. I'm very proud to work in CUNY, where I get to support students on their educational journeys. So as a former CUNY student, former academic advisor, and a current counselor in an opportunity program, I know firsthand how investing in CUNY means investing in our students. So today, I'm asking the committee to ensure we provide CUNY students access to well-funded academic programs and services they need to graduate. So I don't have to convince the committee how in the post-pandemic world, mental health services in CUNY are absolutely critical. It is impossible for students to have academic health without mental health. It can be very challenging to excel in school while dealing with depression or social anxiety. Today, though, I'd like to focus on academic advisement services. For example, every BMCC student has to have access to get advisement in order to register for classes. But academic advisors do much more than advising students on the selection of courses. They're a hub of all essential information, how to enroll in classes, how to apply for financial aid, and to generally navigate the CUNY system, which is especially important for individuals who are first-generation college students. Academic advisors play a crucial role. They demystify the higher ed experience so students can take advantage of all the resources CUNY has to offer. Academic advisors help students understand institutional policies and procedures, help students complete readmit appeals, and provide pre-law and transfer advisement. Access to academic advisors means CUNY students can register for classes in a timely fashion. It reduces probability of taking the wrong courses. Academic advisors provide services to students who are on academic probation. Those services reduce the likelihood of getting dismissed from college. So cutting funding for those crucial academic services can be very detrimental to students' experience in CUNY and a delay a student's graduation. So if it takes a village to raise a child, then it takes a CUNY village to help a student graduate. For poor New Yorkers, the decision to go to college can be both stressful and exciting. Many CUNY first-year students are committed to their academic career, but need remedial services offered by CUNY START and CLIP programs to succeed. Without well-funded programs to provide these services, students cannot advance to credit-bearing courses needed for their majors.
Time expired.
Thank you. Without accessible academic advisement services, students are less likely to graduate and transfer to a senior college. I appreciate you all listening to my testimony.
Thank you for your testimony. I will now call on James Davis, followed by Megan Ahern and Debbie Meyer. James Davis, you may now begin.
Starting time.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm James Davis. I'm the president of the Professional Staff Congress. We represent 30,000 faculty and staff at the City University of New York. I'm honored to be joined on this panel by Tina and Remy and Megan. These are real fighters for faculty, staff, and students at CUNY. They don't get any better than these three. So it's a pleasure to be here with them. And we want to begin also by thanking you, Chairman Dinowitz, and other members of the Higher Education Committee for your recent passage of the resolution in the City Council to support the state legislation, the New Deal for CUNY. And as you all know, this year, the higher education budget potential in Albany, I won't say budget yet, but the potential is at historic levels. And after years of disinvestment, we feel that this is the year with our community allies and the governor setting a positive blueprint. The two branches, the two chambers have proposed $500 million above last year's budget. And rest assured, the PSC is going to be fighting for every penny of that until the budget is passed. And we're honored to have you beside us in that struggle. We're here because New York City also has an obligation to invest in CUNY, an investment in students and workers and communities that will lift up New York in its continued recovery from the pandemic. Last year, and some of you are familiar with this, the Comptroller's Office under Stringer released a report that found in 2019, CUNY graduates paid $4.6 billion in state taxes and earned $28.6 billion more collectively than they would have without post-secondary degrees. Moreover, in 2017, a team of economists at Stanford found that CUNY propels almost 6 times as many low-income students into the middle class and beyond as 8 Ivy League campuses plus Duke and MIT and Stanford and Chicago combined. So my time is limited, and so I just want to tell you the 2 things I want to touch on in my testimony, and if I don't get to them all, you can read about them in the written testimony, please. One is just that CUNY must be excluded from the mayor's PEG, the program to eliminate the gap, in order to bring back our faculty. And 2, there are specific programmatic investments in CUNY, and as time permits, I'd like to be able to talk about those. So the first on the PEG, I'm really here to urge you to support our members' work, especially in the community colleges, which rely on the city for substantial operating funds. We're glad that the mayor did not baseline last year's cuts, most of them anyway, to CUNY's general operating funds, and we're thankful. But we're concerned about this 3% PEG to city services, and that would seriously impede
Time expired.
CUNY's ability. Chair Dinowitz, could I just have 30 more seconds?
Yes, you may.
That
Thank you,
3% PEG would seriously impede CUNY's ability to replenish the full-time faculty that have been lost to attrition or retirement during the pandemic. So that PEG cut at CUNY would be $8.5 million initially, and then expand over 3 years and get baselined at 14.6 million. That would drastically prevent us from filling the 146 full-time faculty positions that we have lost since the pandemic. As I mentioned, we have recommendations, requests for specific programmatic requests. I don't have time to go into those in my verbal testimony. We'll be submitting the written version. And I thank you for your support and your advocacy. We know you're going to be continuing to fight alongside of us for a fully funded community college system for all of our students and a fully funded CUNY. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I will now call on Megan Ahern, followed by Debbie Meyer.
Starting time.
Good afternoon. My name is Megan Ahern. I'm the program director for NIPIRG, and we are a nonpartisan, not-for-profit research and advocacy organization, and we are student-run. Among our organization's top priorities is higher education, and namely advocating for free and quality public higher education at CUNY, New York City's best strategy to boost racial and economic equity and move forward in COVID recovery. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. The City Council has been great partners in the fight for CUNY funding, and we're calling on you all to join us again in winning a fair budget that fully funds and invests in CUNY in 2023. New York City must do its part to envision a new deal for CUNY on top of state investments and federal emergency funding. So to touch on a few points, community college funding. Enrollment has been a challenge during the pandemic. However, even before that, 2011 to 2019, community colleges that serve more low-income students and students of color saw a decline in full-time enrollments. Bronx Community College, Hostos, Kingsborough, LaGuardia, Queensborough. And now CUNY is experiencing an existential crisis of dropping enrollment, resulting in dropping revenue, which in turn undercuts CUNY's ability to bolster services that attract new students. That is why it's so critical for New York City to step in with robust funding that will entice students to come back to campus and enroll at CUNY. We're calling on the City Council to commit in the final budget to additional funding to hold community colleges harmless from recent enrollment dips and move to a tuition-free model, that CUNY was founded on. The New York City budget should also provide new investment to help the university begin to meet the minimum ratios of mental health counselors, as was previously talked about, academic advisors, and full-time faculty to students that are required in the New York State New Deal for CUNY. The New York City budget should add funding to CUNY's nationally renowned Accelerate ASAP program. It should be baselined to protect and expand funding. ASAP takes a comprehensive approach, as everyone knows here, to college access and affordability by covering tuition costs and building in academic counseling, mentoring, and covering related costs such as MetroCards and textbooks. This approach works with increased retention and graduation rates, and ASAP deserves more funding and more support. It is truly an already existing model of college for all in New York City. A couple other priorities. The New York City budget should fully fund city council funded initiatives that supports CUNY student success, childcare centers, the Peter Vallone Scholarship, Citizenship Now, and campus food pantries. And
Time expired.
Thank you. Anti-hunger initiatives such as the State Hunger-Free Campus Act, and expand fair fares to college students. Transit costs can be a huge barrier. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I will now call on Debbie Meyer.
Starting time.
Am I unmuted?
Yes,
Yes, you may begin.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity today, Chair Dinowitz and all the committee members. I want to pick up the conversation on remediation. I first want to ask you all, did you know that 95% of people can learn to read? Do you know how few do actually learn to read? Did you know that many of these people have parents that can outsource the reading instruction because the school failed to teach these kids? The ability to read is not connected to intelligence. My name is Debbie Meyer, and I'm a Layla Bundles Community Scholar at Columbia University. I'm a member of the Arise Coalition, the Dyslexia Alliance for Black Children, and Harlem Women Strong. Most importantly, I am the mother of a dyslexic son and the wife of a dyslexic man. It's heartening to me to hear the new mayor and school chancellor address the dyslexia to prison pipeline and the literacy crisis. I wonder though, why isn't higher education concerned about our literacy crisis? Reviews of teaching colleges show that less than half of undergraduate programs address just some of the 5 pillars of evidence-based reading instruction. And that which is left out most often, the most basic pillars, the keys to unlocking the code of the English language. Master's programs feature even less of these. Even special education programs gloss over the 5 pillars, and some literacy specialist programs do not address any evidence-based instruction. When dyslexia represents 80% of all learning disabilities, and our city and state and national reading proficiency is so low, one can only scratch their head until they're bald. Principals who have attended leadership programs in our higher education institutions don't know how to evaluate literacy curriculum and support teachers that do know the science of reading or understand the data that good assessments report. Instead, they purchase curriculum and professional development such as units of study from Teachers College or from Fontes and Pinnell. Other times they purchase good curriculum, but don't train their teachers how to use it. And too often they file away the assessment data in a cabinet rather than responding with evidence-based instruction. Doctors learn about the genetic factors in Tay-Sachs and sickle cell and are quick to cancel couples that might carry who both might carry these genes. They never ask about dyslexia. If one parent has dyslexia, there is a 65% chance a child will have dyslexia. Social workers are often in the homes of people that do not read well, but have not learned enough about dyslexia or the literacy crisis and the curriculum casualties to help a family. School psychologists haven't had a deep enough pre-training to help students. And dyslexia is the most common learning disability. The results? Our schools are leaving so many kids behind, not reading well. You can't distinguish them from the dyslexic kid or other curriculum casualties of the haphazard instructions from poorly trained teachers. Taxpayers pay for the central DOE to retrain teachers. Just a few more minutes. I'm going to call out a promising project at Brooklyn College where Professor Katie Pace Miles trains her students in evidence-based reading. But will these teachers end up in classrooms with no principal support? Will the kids that started to get help get antithetical instruction? Please just fund the universities, teaching colleges, and social work programs and medical schools that include the full science of reading and genetic factors of dyslexia in their programs. We leave money on the table, but by not addressing literacy correctly early and remediating instead in upper elementary, middle schools, high schools, colleges, in adult education programs, and prison and reentry programs. College is only a ladder for success for those that learned how to read. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Before I turn to Chair Dinowitz for additional questions for our public panelists, I'd like to remind all our council members to use the raise hand function in Zoom if they have a question for this panel. Chair Dinowitz.
Thank you, Amy. I don't think it was said out loud, but on this committee, we have CUNY graduates. We have 2 CUNY adjunct professors. We have a former teacher and the spouse of a former principal. We have a lot of education experts on this panel, and it gives me a lot of hope for the future of our education system, our CUNY system here in the city. Probably should have said that earlier, but it's something that I was thinking about, Debbie, when you said 95% of kids can learn to read. And I love the way that that was phrased. And it's absolutely true. And I don't want to speak for any of the other educators on this committee. That is to say that I hope the public recognizes that as well, that our children can read. I am very hopeful about the future of education in our city because we have a mayor and a chancellor who recognize that. It is one of the reasons that I'm asking a number of questions on things like early intervention services to address the needs, identify the needs, and address the needs of our students early on, whether from 0 to 5, 0 to 3 years old. It's one of the reasons that I think we shouldn't be cutting CUNY and cutting these programs, but investing in it. And I've seen it myself in the classroom when I taught high school. I had high schoolers who weren't reading because they were at a first, second, third grade level. But I was given the opportunity to teach them to read because I, like my colleague here, went to Hunter and actually got good training in teaching literacy and teaching decoding. And I sat with them, gave them direct instruction, and lo and behold, they learned how to read, which shows to me that if we just sit and take the time and invest that time and energy and money in our students, they will succeed. And so given the values of our mayor and our DOE chancellor and what we have here on this committee, it is time that we double down and invest in our education and invest in what we know works, and finding that connection between CUNY and CUNY's role in providing that education and support to everywhere along the line in our city, whether it's training more social workers and teachers to provide those services to our young students, whether it's investing in our CUNY students in CUNY Tutor Corps to go into our middle and high schools and provide that direct instruction, which we know works. And all part of that, as was mentioned in our other panelists, is providing those wraparound services like mental health supports for all of our students so they can be their best selves, so they can give of themselves like so many of our CUNY students do to others. I want to thank the panelists for their testimony. I do want to turn it over to Councilmember Barron for his questions.
Starting time.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad you did mention that, Chair Dinowitz. When I was at Hunter, my minor was elementary education, and I even did student teaching at Hunter College Elementary School, some student teaching there. Them students were incredible. But I wanted to say 2 things to President James Davis. One, I've been in constant contact with my colleagues in Albany, because when we were in Albany, we prioritized CUNY, which is why we got money for the GAP and money for different kinds of things. And they said they are committed. I just hope it lasts to the end. You know how that goes, when we get to that final, sign the deal. Secondly, President Davis, I would like to hear us, when we speak about CUNY students and what they've done, we got to go beyond saying we got some into the middle class. The whole mission is not to get a few students into the middle class. That happens, that's a good thing, but unless we talk and teach students not to be bourgeois, not to be, middle class, not that everybody in middle class is bourgeois, but not to get caught up in materialism and going to school to get into the middle class. We got to teach them how to deal with changing the institutions in society, social transformation, social activism, civic responsibility. So when you mention the success of students, talk about the student activists, talk about the need to change a capitalist system, whether you agree with me or not, say it anyway. Talk about, the need that see that capitalism is not working, and if you don't have that position, at least saying that there's some things that need to be transformed so the masses of our people will benefit. You uplift the masses, not just a handful of CUNY students. That's a very small number compared to the masses of people that are suffering in poverty and miseducation and all of that. So I just don't like when I hear we got students into the middle class, because that's not the mission of CUNY, never was. It's one of the results of it. And if you make it there, fine, but that shouldn't be the priority and the only thing mentioned.
Thank you for your testimony, Chair.
Amy, you got muted.
Sorry. Well, thank you for your testimony, Councilmember Barron. Seeing no other hands raised, I will now turn back to Chair Dinowitz. If you have any other questions for this panel, otherwise, I believe we have heard from everyone who has signed up to testify. We have a
It corresponds to Councilmember Barron's excellent point.
Yes,
if that's
you are unmuted now, so
yeah.
You're good.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Barron, thanks for making that observation. Really appreciate it. We like to cite that study that was done by that economist from Stanford, not because it points out, as you rightly note, not because it points out that it propels our students into becoming, good, compliant bourgeois citizens, but because it goes directly to this question that I think you're identifying rightly, which is we have such a profoundly unequal society, and people look at investing in CUNY as if it's some kind of philanthropy or throwing good money after bad. And the point of citing that study, for us anyway, is to say an investment in CUNY is actually a much more powerful investment than, for example, what Mike Bloomberg did with all his money and giving it to Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins is not engaged in that transformative redistribution of wealth and political capital that you're talking about. CUNY is involved in that. So you're right. It's a bit of shorthand, and it lends itself to the kind of interpretation. I think your messaging feedback is appreciated, but I think it's precisely for the reason that you described, that we need to say when we talk about using taxpayer money to fund CUNY, we're talking about investing for a good fiscal sense, and not just because this is a moral imperative, right? We see it absolutely, I think, in the same terms as yourself.
Debbie Meyer, I see you had your hand raised.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman, for talking about direct instruction. Now, how do we get that through the CUNY education colleges and the educational leadership colleges so that we don't produce more principals that don't support the teachers? If they're not all aligned, we're going to have these curriculum casualties, and they're going to look like Councilman Barron and Councilman Felice, because the kids that look like me and you have parents that can outsource their education. So how do we fix it so that 95% of kids learn to read?
Oh, she wants the answer. When it comes to education, there's no easy answer. And I'll tell you some of the work. You mentioned my parents. My dad is a CUNY graduate. I mean, he is the story of what CUNY can do. He grew up with a single mother. He lived in public housing. He slept every night in the foyer of his apartment, in the Bronx. And our public education system in CUNY was his vehicle for upward mobility, which is one of the purposes of CUNY, a vehicle for upward mobility. And even before I was born, the things that happened that CUNY did for my life before I was even born, something that I appreciate and will appreciate for the rest of my life. What CUNY gave to me directly, my master's degree, my education, is something that impacted my life. But I also, just like my father has, I do my best to pay it forward as a public school teacher. Councilmember Barron, as a public servant, getting his Hunter education, and that is the value of CUNY. When it comes to the specific curriculum, I can tell you that this is not an easy answer, because it is something that I've brought up with the Department of Education at private meetings and at committee hearings. And the truth is, when you get to a level like middle school, high school, there is no real incentive for a principal to teach direct, for a principal to have their teachers teach direct reading instruction, because there's no regents associated with it. Child's not going to get high school credit for it. So that in turn makes it look like the school's not doing their job. And so we have a system that incentivizes forcing all of our students to do pretty much the same thing, regardless of their individual needs. And that is, I think, a combination of failures in our state and our city, and in many respects, our federal government. I could talk about this for hours. I won't. I won't, because I want to give Councilmember Barron an opportunity to say his last words, and then we can close out the hearing.
Ms. Mayor, what an excellent point you're making. You know, one of the things I've always said, every child is educable. We just haven't put the system together to educate all of them. And children have more ways to learn than we know how to teach. And so we have to be very creative in our teaching methods. You know, often my wife is a teacher for 36 years and former chair of this, Inez Barron, former chair of higher ed, 36 years in the system. She retired as a principal. But we always talk about what happens in the classroom as you're teaching reading, sight words and phonics, you know, they go together. But also what people don't realize, for Black children, children of African ancestry, there's something I really want to, I'm gonna ask the chair if we can do an actual hearing on this. I don't know if you're all, and I won't be long, you all remember the Ebonics movement when everybody went crazy, or what's this Ebonics thing? You know, what we were really saying is that there's a thing called linguistic retention, that Black children retain some of the substructure of their language, African languages, because we were originally Africans, and they retain some of the substructure of that language. You can identify how a person speaks or what a person speaks, not by their superficial vocabulary words, but by their grammar, their syntax, their phonics system, the different parts. So when you hear a Black child say, "What your name be?" and the verb is at the end, that's not bad English. That was a different way of saying it with a different language. Or you notice how a lot of us say this and that instead of this and that, because the TH sound in many African languages has a DA sound. And then sometimes if the TH is at the end of a word, it has an F sound. Both of us are going down south after I brush my teeth. So if you say you're speaking bad English, you're lowering the self-esteem of that child instead of saying that is one way it's being that you learned with your African languages. It's not bad English. And even in the double consonant, you notice, I promise I'll stop after this, Chair. In the double consonant, you notice in African language system, the second consonant is silent. So I'm running for office, not running. I'm putting my pencil on the desk, not the desk. I'm taking a test, not a test. So how you go about dealing with that, and for my Latino brothers and sisters, if they say Casablanca, you know, you can't say that's backwards, that the adjective should come first. That's White House, but casa is house. and white comes after that because in their language, that's not bad English. That's a different way because it's a different system. You know, English is not the world's, you know, it's not, everybody ain't, I'm not an Englishman. I'm originally from Africa. So I'm doing good with your language. And even the people in England said that Americans messed up the King's English. So I think, Chair, it'll be good to do a thing on linguistics at some point, a whole piece on linguistics, particularly as it focuses on Black and Latino people. If we had our language as a bridge program to teach the mastery of standard English, that would be good, because then they'll appreciate the origins of the influence of speech. And I thank you for listening to me. Sorry about that.
Thank you. I would like to thank everyone for attending Councilmember Barron's TED Talk today. It was delightful. No, I want to thank the administration, all the panelists, for my fellow council members, and of course my staff, my committee staff, and the finance staff for the work they did leading up to today's hearing and during the hearing. Look, we voted for, the people elected a mayor who talks about upstream, addressing problems before they become big problems. Education does that. CUNY does that. Now is the time to invest more, not cut back on what we know works, what we know helps address issues of our children, our young adults, and adults upstream. Now is the time to invest in the academics for our students. Now is the time to invest in programs we know work, like CUNY Tutor Corps, like CUNY Culture Corps, like ASAP, like our one-stop programs. Now is the time to invest in the very people who are the future of our city, who are tomorrow's nurses, tomorrow's teachers, social workers, early intervention specialists, reading specialists, tech entrepreneurs. Now is the time. And in this committee, we will be working, we'll be fighting to increase CUNY's budget, to make sure that the future of our city is bright and that our students have every tool available to them so we can address issues upstream and we can improve the lives of all New Yorkers, because that's what education does. It addresses all of the needs of our city, our education, our mental health, our safety. That's what we are going to be fighting for on this committee. And I thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.